Recently, it kind of feels like all major gaming companies are doing some really stupid stuff. Microsoft and Xbox recently closed down several studios in the name of saving a few bucks, including most notably Tango Gameworks, the very studio that created the small yet commercially successful, profitable, prestigious, and award-winning indie darling Hi-Fi Rush. After shutting the studio down, head of Xbox Game Studios Matt Booty told the entire company in a town hall meeting the very next day that, quote, "We need smaller games that give us prestige and awards." The hypocrisy and tone-deaf backwards thinking by these executives truly boggles the mind. Not to be left out, Sony almost killed this golden goose recently with the Helldivers 2 debacle, pulling the rug on the massive player base by abruptly informing all PC players they would need to create a PlayStation Network account to keep playing the game. Later backtracking on this shady play after hundreds of thousands of players vocalized their righteous rage with countless negative reviews and comments against this greedy, tone-deaf scheme. CEO of EA Games Andrew Wilson recently told investors that they are seriously considering putting in advertisements in their full-price AAA games. Nearly every major gaming company has considered, or more often delivered, on the idea to lay off employees to save money, even in studios that are doing well financially. On and on, it seems like the video game industry is just not in a good place right now. Which brings me to Nintendo. Look, I've always been a Nintendo fan. Ever since when I was first a kid and I first played Link's Awakening for Game Boy Color, and I realized I would be a video game fan for the rest of my life. But the hardest part about being a Nintendo fan is when Nintendo makes yet another baffling, anti-consumer, fan base insulting decision right after they display another forward-thinking and thoughtfully deliberated decision that makes them stand out among the muck of the current gaming industry. These back and forth decisions are the main reason why it's incredibly hard to continue to proudly identify yourself as a Nintendo fan. Which, if you've been a Nintendo fan for as long as I have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about and how often this kind of crap has happened. First, some groundwork. Nintendo is responsible for making the most iconic, commercially successful, and universally loved video games in history. Full stop. The most famous and widely recognized video game characters? Probably Mario and Link, right? With honorable mentions to Pikachu, Luigi, and Donkey Kong, and several more Nintendo exclusives. Of course, there are iconic video game characters not under Nintendo's umbrella, the Master Chief, Tony Hawk, Kratos, whatever, but I'm talking from a global perspective, especially from people who don't really play video games. Everyone and their grandma knows who Mario is, and Nintendo has capitalized on this well, most notably in their recent Super Mario movie, which is the highest grossing video game movie of all time by like almost $1 billion. Second place being Detective Pikachu, another Nintendo exclusive. Speaking of Pokemon, the Pokemon franchise alone has grossed an estimated $150 billion in revenue, making it the highest grossing entertainment media franchise of all time. Of all time. But it's not all about the games. Let's talk hardware. It's hard to find exact numbers, but Nintendo has sold a total of around 900 million individual consoles, while second place Sony, despite having the best-selling console of all time in the PS2, has only sold a total of around 600 million consoles, a full third less than Nintendo, despite having massively better technology. Seriously, have you ever tried running a modern HD game on the Switch? I mean, it's horrible. Still, it's another airtight example of Nintendo consistently dominating in their field. Then there's the most important topic of all, the games themselves. Think about this. Nintendo is responsible for making a ton of games, like many games that are the best game in the entire genre. Look, ask yourself, what's the best kart racer? Obviously Mario Kart, right? Okay, what's the best 3D platformer game? It's probably Super Mario 64, right? Or Galaxy or Odyssey. Super Smash Bros. Is the best platform fighter ever. You can't even have the whole genre of Metroidvanias without Metroid, another Nintendo exclusive. Breath of the Wild might be the best open world game of all time, and if you disagree, feel free to tell me in all caps below. That's great. Advanced Wars is the best tactics game ever. Super Mario World is probably the best 2D platformer of all time. Ocarina of Time is probably the best action adventure of all time, and the list goes on. All Nintendo exclusives. As a company, we have to admit that Nintendo has made some very forward-thinking decisions. In a time where massive layoffs are occurring in almost every corner of the video game industry, Nintendo recently did something truly beautiful and inspiring. They've not only avoided laying off virtually any employee, they've even decided to give their employees a 10% pay raise to keep them happy and help them stay ahead of the current cost of living. I mean, that's amazing. We have to admit that. Now, how about portable gaming? This company basically invented the concept. The Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the 3DS, which is the second highest selling console of all time. All of these completely opened up the ability for anybody to play games wherever they want, with some truly incredible games too. And all that finally culminated in the Switch, which is also one of the best-selling gaming consoles of all time. Nintendo were the first ones to truly usher in motion-based controls at homes that weren't absolutely terrible in the Wii, getting tens of millions of official non-gamer folks to buy Wii Sports to play with their grandkids. And yet, for every forward-thinking decision Nintendo has made, they seem compelled, unable to control themselves, to make an equally opposite, confounding, and backwards-thinking decision every time. Quick reminder, by the way, I make a ton of video essays like these, and if you want to see more of them, be sure to click that subscribe button. Okay. Despite their inarguable dominance, Nintendo has had a long track record over the past few decades of making inscrutable, baffling decisions that have often led to massive flops and failures in both their hardware, like the Wii U, the Virtual Boy, and never publicly admitting ever that Joy-Con drift is even a thing, as well as their software and fan bases, like making it nearly impossible for anyone to access and play older titles, consistently trotting out the worst online gaming infrastructures in gaming history, etc. They've sent out cease and desist letters to tiny little unofficial Super Smash Bros. Tournaments, prohibiting players to even think about playing that franchise competitively. This is the company that thought mini CDs were going to be the future of gaming cartridges. Remember the Super Mario movie last year? Well, here's the original Super Mario movie. Ugh. Yikes. At this point, Nintendo basically needs a full-time accounting department to track down how many DMCAs they've sent out to prevent fan bases from publicly talking about or featuring any Nintendo exclusive content like graphics or mods and music on their content channels. Again, for every forward-thinking decision, Nintendo seems contractually obligated to make an equally terrible backwards-thinking one. That's why, in spite of all the good Nintendo has done, in spite of the embarrassment of riches of Nintendo's countless genre-defining masterpieces, man, it is so hard to be a Nintendo fan sometimes. Honestly, it's come to a point where anyone who says they fully support all of Nintendo's decisions is either purely naive or someone who's probably employed by Nintendo and is contractually obligated to publicly support anything their employer does. But for the rest of us, if you've been a Nintendo fan for longer than 2 seconds, there's probably something they've done as a company that has been so ridiculous, so wacky and unexplainable and objectively terrible, it can make you feel almost embarrassed to call yourself a Nintendo fan, especially as you get older. For me, there's no other obvious or more glaring example of Nintendo's backwards thinking than their relationship with competitive Super Smash Bros. With over 75 million total copies sold of this franchise, and inarguably the best platform fighter ever, there's a reason everyone freaking loved these games, myself included. I put like 1,000 hours alone into Smash Ultimate, and for years I was going to tournaments. I had like 50 different tournaments I entered. I hired professional players to coach me, and I traveled to major tournaments to compete with other like-minded gamers. And so being so ingrained in the Smash community, it was impossible not to feel like Nintendo just straight up hated the competitive community of Super Smash Bros. This is a grassroots community that has almost never received any official support, resources, or even acknowledgement from Nintendo. On the contrary, these communities have survived in spite of massive attacks from Nintendo to shut it all down. Everything from sending out cease and desist letters to small-time local tournaments, prohibiting tournaments from giving out prize money, and consistently refusing to acknowledge this branch of their fan base even exists, ignoring thousands of their most dedicated fans. While the other gaming companies like Riot or Activision Blizzard or Epic Games are 110% on board with their competitive fan base and help contribute to truly mind-bogglingly huge prize pools for the global esports scene, Super Smash Bros. Players have to be content with tiny prize pools created entirely from grassroots revenue streams, meaning that winners of major tournaments routinely don't earn enough prize money to even cover a meal. In 2022 at CEO, a major Smash Bros. Tournament, Juan Hungerbox de Biedma, arguably the largest and most popular Smash Bros. Player and streamer, revealed he received a mere $75 for coming in 5th place at one of the most stacked Smash tournaments in the world. There are countless other examples beyond Smash too. Nintendo rarely, if ever, puts its most popular first-party games on sale. That means if you want to buy Super Mario Odyssey, released in 2017, or Mario Kart 8, released in 2014, that crap still costs full price today. They respect their own IP so much that the thought of ever making them accessible to a new generation of would-be Nintendo fans means having to pay full price for graphics and gameplay that were probably outdated before Barack Obama was president. Even their straight ports of games with literally no upgrades like Skyward Sword are re-released at full price and almost never go on sale. All of this is released on woefully underperforming hardware. The Switch barely performs at the levels of the PS4 and Xbox One generation. Meanwhile, Sony and Microsoft have released the PS5 and Xbox Series since then, and are about to launch console updates like the PS5 Pro and upgrades to the Xbox Series, while Nintendo has yet to officially announce almost anything regarding their new console, which probably won't come out for another year or so. While Sony and Microsoft, mostly Microsoft, have made enormous efforts to promote game conservation and backwards compatibility, Nintendo straight up takes down every possible way to play countless classic titles, either releasing them again as is, full price, or refusing to acknowledge these games even exist. True story, a fan of the F-Zero franchise once spent $40,000 on Nintendo stock just to be given the right to publicly ask in a Nintendo shareholder meeting about if they're ever going to make any more F-Zero games. And their answer, maybe, basically. Tell me, if you don't have a working 20-year-old console or a physical disc without pirating or downloading ROMs, how would you play The Wind Waker? Or any first-generation Pokemon games? Or Mario Kart Double Dash? Nintendo has taken concentrated efforts to ensure these games are straight up unavailable to purchase, and they're taking active legal action against emulator companies to ensure players can't even download these games in other ways. I mean, come on, this company puts out some of the best franchises of all time, hooray, then refuses to allow players to even access these games. It boggles the mind, and it makes it infuriating to be a Nintendo fan. The thing is, I freaking love Nintendo games. I know a lot of you do too. My favorite game of all time is Ocarina of Time. Zelda is my favorite franchise of all time, and so many of my other most favorite games of all time are all Nintendo exclusives. Metroid, Pokemon, Advance Wars, Golden Sun, Smash Bros, and more. And I want other people to play these games too and tell them about it. But with Nintendo, it's kind of like inviting your friends over to your house, but you have to tell them that they have to be quiet the whole time because your parents don't like loud noise. Also, they can only eat broccoli and water because your parents don't like processed food or sugars. Also, you can only stay for like 45 minutes before your parents kick you out. You still want to come over? I mean, come on, this is what it's like to be a Nintendo fan nowadays. And as a lifelong fan of this company, it's harder and harder to really share my excitement about this company and their games because of the countless ways they make it so needlessly hard for their biggest fans to enjoy their favorite games. For me, I try and separate franchises from gaming companies. Like, I'll say I love the Zelda games, not that I love Nintendo, or even that I love Switch games. Nintendo will continue to make baffling, infuriating decisions that continue to hurt and annoy customers, but we have to admit they make great games. And despite their refusal to engage in the console wars and stay competitive with their hardware, I mean, just look at Mortal Kombat 1 on Switch, it's horrible. Nintendo games are some of my most favorite games of all time. and I take what Nintendo gives me. Because for me, I'm not going to tell my kids how great Nintendo was, but I will tell them how much I loved Metroid Prime, or Pokemon Blue, or Link's Awakening, and how much those games meant to me. Even if the company that made them still makes some of the most backwards thinking decisions in all of gaming. Thanks for watching, and if you want to watch more videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button.